So we're going to do a little bit of a pivot now. We're going to go away a bit from messaging and talk about network APIs, which I think, based on what our members tell us, is one of the hottest topics. Everyone's looking to network APIs as an opportunity. So before we get into it, though, let's make some introductions. So maybe, Ryan, if you want to introduce yourself quickly.
Sure. Hi, I'm Ryan Tollofson, the Director of Marketing and Emerging Services for TELUS Partner Solutions. Welcome to TELUS House. And I'm glad you can all make it today. And I run a portfolio of anything that's not a facilities-based service, basically, in wholesale. So IoT, APIs, messaging, and wireless reseller, MVNE, MVNX. So a broad portfolio, but APIs are one of the areas that we're banking on growth and innovating, so happy to talk about it.
Thanks. Upinder? Yeah, feel like it.
Hi, Upinder, Saini. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I have spent pretty much all of my life in telecom, almost about 3 decades in telecom, and most of my time was at Rogers, and now I run a company, president and CEO, called EnStream, and EnStream is a joint venture of Bell, Rogers, and TELUS. Very, very much focused on the commercialization of the network APIs, and particularly in one specific area in terms of the fraud in Canada has taken off like crazy. It has actually taken off globally, but in Canada itself, it's a give or take about $15 billion problem. And growing. So we're quite focused on that, excited to talk about it. Huge pivot from messaging. I was listening to the sessions in the morning, and I think in North America, we are very well, particularly in Canada, very well protected when it comes to the sort of messaging market. It's going strong. We see it sort of parts of messaging, not or tapering off in other regions. Anyway, we'll talk about it. We'll get to that in a second, but great to get into some of the discussion, what we're seeing with the network APIs.
Great, thanks. And over to you, Terry.
I'm Terry Guo, co-founder of LotusFlare. We are headquartered in San Francisco, but we do have a big office here in North York. We operate 2 lines of business. The first line is an enterprise software business, and as part of that business, we built a API monetization platform for operators, and we've deployed that across the globe. The second line of business is a consumer-facing business. It's called Nomad eSIM, so we sell travel eSIMs. So that's relevant to this conversation because we're not just providing the tech, but we're also developers ourselves, and we're consuming these network APIs.
Great, thanks. So I was starting to say, and just by way of introduction, at MEF, one of our programs is, we call it APIs and Authentication. And when we kicked off the program, it was called something else about 1.5 years ago. When we kicked it off, we were lucky to get 5 or 6 people each month to our monthly meetings. I think in our last meeting, we had well over 40 people. So we're just seeing an increased interest in what APIs and authentication can bring to the industry and to end users. And where people are specifically hungry is, what are the use cases? What can I use network APIs for? And I think there's an education piece around it as well, because although we in the industry might know a lot about network APIs, our potential customers don't, or they don't understand how they can use them. They might have a need, but they don't know that network APIs could fill that need. So we have a working group just dedicated on identifying use cases, and not just from the supply side, but what's the demand on the demand side of the use cases. And Upinder and I were talking about this last night, and there's some really cool use cases out there. So what I thought the way we could kick off today's panel is to talk about some of those interesting use cases that we're seeing out in the industry. And Ryan, maybe I'll start with you, and you can just kick us off.
Yeah, so I'm going to somewhat cheat because I'm going to give 2 use cases. One, just to bridge this conversation about this being a big pivot, because I don't think it's that big of a pivot. I think it's definitely adjacent. But Silent Auth and Number Verify 2 and the Kamara stack is an evolution and a complementary product of messaging. And that's one of the reasons that brought me to APIs. But I think that even though the consumers may not be aware of it, if you use a bank app in Canada, you're using APIs most likely from EnStream and using that for authentication. So consumers are already using it. They just don't know what to call it. or that they're using it. But the use case that I said I would talk about, and the one that's exciting to me, is where you bring agentic AI into the mix, because at some point, because to me APIs, there's many use cases, but identity and authentication is a major one. And outside of fraud management, being able to identify if an agent actually belongs to you, if your device actually, using your device to help you authenticate that agent is a representative of you as a person, and having that conversation with another agent who represents maybe Loblaws, and having that conversation, that we need to make sure that those agents are valid and true, and network APIs can help us with that.
Yeah. Interesting, I just saw this morning in the news that the ITU, the International Telecom Union, so part of the UN, is looking into now standards around exactly that. So how do you authenticate the agent across multiple parties? And I think there's sort of a competitive edge there, or anti-competitive thing they're looking at, where they don't want these being sandboxed by hyperscalers. Sure. So if a third-party developer wants to create an AI agent, will that work across different platforms?
The universal token. So the first person who can develop a universal token, tell me how to invest my money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Upinder, maybe you can elaborate and go on to another use case.
Yeah, no, I'll pick up on Ryan's point that it's not a pivot, which I would say, yes, I agree. I actually think that the telecom as a business, primarily sort of communications messaging, and now we are evolving that, and the network APIs present us that opportunity to provide a trust platform in the market. So what do I mean by that? Like what I referenced earlier in terms of fraud is growing, and the AI threat that gets presented from a bad actor perspective, AI has made it even much more simpler, easier, and the scale is incredible in terms of how fast fraud can happen. And what we are seeing is, these institutions, primarily where there is high value and high risk that is involved, businesses are not able to, with high confidence, trust a particular transaction or a login within the data that they have within their four walls. They are relying heavily on the data and the signals from outside of their four walls, and everything is happening here. We were talking about billions of messages earlier. Billions of transactions are happening on mobile. And that's where the network APIs are playing a big role, and they're really kind of providing signals and capabilities that could be a heavy trust that the organizations will gain as a result of it. So give you an example that we see pretty much on a daily basis. Say you're kind of transferring $5,000. This is an e-transfer that is getting sent out to somebody. You'll typically get a password challenge that you need to kind of put in a password challenge. You'll probably get, depending upon what type of device you're using or different location, you may get OTP, MFA challenge as well. And bank has done whatever they needed to do, right protocol. But there is a lot of social engineering that is taking place that MFA could land in the wrong hands because somebody's hijacked that SMS. So how do you imagine now if you just eliminate that SMS altogether? If you make it completely invisible, raise the security, the bank is able to check everything behind the scenes silently that the number is good, the possession of the device is still in the customer's hand, location is good, and on top of that, the session is seen on the network side. Make it invisible. The moment you open up the door for the customer to ask them to prove who they are, you're asking for an opportunity for the bad actor to intersect that transaction. So I think if you completely make that invisible, that is one of the big primary use cases that we see in the market. And I think it's growing. It's kind of started to build up, but that'll be one example that comes to mind.
Yeah. Maybe just before coming to you, Terry, if I can ask you, Upinder, we had this conversation on the messaging side just before the break around adoption. And maybe you can just, because I wonder if you maybe should have done an introduction, but how widely has network APIs been adopted in the Canadian market? Also, I noticed a big announcement a week or two ago, so maybe you could tell us about that, and that can inform us around adoption.
You know, it's, I would say Canada, from a global perspective, is actually leading when it comes to the commercialization of the network API business. I think a lot of countries globally are still trying to get the technology ready, assemble all these APIs, and we've actually proven the first use case within the financial services sector primarily. With security and identity, deployed in most of the banks today. You know, whenever there is a one-time password going, there is probably a check happening behind the scenes whether the SIM is still intact and the customer is holding that phone or somebody else is holding the phone. So I think that particular use case, its adoption is there, but we have a lot more work to do. People don't understand what these network APIs are, and if we actually try to go sell the network APIs. You are just that conversation is going to fall on deaf ears. You need to sell outcomes in terms of what is the outcome that the business is really looking for, not really the network API. So I think there is a lot more work that we need to do as industry, as partners. I think the ecosystem needs to work together. Technology providers, the CPaaS players, telcos, banks, everybody need to kind of work together. The partnership that we announced was the Vonage partnership. And that was actually purely the reason why we are super excited and why we love that partnership is that is to build that awareness and build the scale. We are still early days. Even though we are leading from a global perspective, I still call it early days. I think there is a lot more opportunity outside of the financial services sector, in government, in insurance, in media, in entertainment, even the hyperscalers. So there's like the list goes on, and we need the partners who are more GTM focused, and Vonage is one of them. So we are kind of now putting plans together in terms of what the rest of the year need to look like in 2027. A lot more to come. I'm quite bullish with respect to the potential. I do think that this is a solid growth potential that is ahead of us. So looking forward to that.
Thanks. And Terry, I think when the three of us were discussing like last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, this panel, you brought in the element of consent and trust, and I think you had some ideas around that. So maybe we can look at that for a second or two.
Sure, I can talk about consent. I think the market sometimes look at consent as a barrier, but I don't see it that way. I actually see consent as a catalyst if we do it right. But it requires a mindset shift. We have to not look at consent as a static kind of terms and service, right? It has to evolve into a dynamic, secure, kind of per API type of consent services. And the good news is that Kamara has come out and defined a framework for how consent works. And there are two key concepts that was introduced. One is scope, the other one is purpose. What that means is that every time someone you use an API token to access that API. Those two concepts are embedded in that API token. And what that gets you is that one, the developers, when they come in and access an API, they're not just telling the operator that, hey, I have authenticated myself. They're also saying, here's my purpose, and here is exactly the resource I'm accessing. The other thing this enables is that we can log all of this and make it available for audit. Third is users can go into a portal potentially that's user-facing or consumer-facing. They can look at exactly what information was accessed on their behalf, and they can change the consent settings in real time. And all of this, what it does is it enables the ecosystem to be able to commercialize with confidence.
Yeah, no, I see. Before going to another question, I don't know if either of you want to build on that or have any further comments.
I mean, I can build on consent. I mean, yeah. I think that is going to be the bridge that takes us to market, honestly, as a telco. I mean, TELUS has been in APIs through the Data for Good program for quite some time. That's not a non-commercialized program for research data. And consent is obviously a requirement for that. How are we getting our subscribers' consent to be able to share metadata, to share aggregated data from a research perspective? And now we're going to be using other parts of the data in network APIs that are going to be commercialized. That's going to raise the bar on the requirements for consent and and every user is going to have a different perspective on how they want their data to be used, if at all. So I think the TELUS Digital Trust Office is highly involved in our ability to figure out how we capture consent, how we monitor it and manage it, and it's going to be the key to our ability to grow the portfolio.
Upinder, anything you want to add to that, or?
I think the point that I'll add is, consent is critical. It's important to have the transparency with the consumer, and you got to maintain that. But at the same time, I don't think that the consent is required for every use case. I think consent is going to be very specific. For certain scenarios, you need to have explicit consent. For other scenarios, you probably need to go by the implied consent. So, the example that I was using earlier, if you're trying to protect somebody from any threats from bad actors, you could rely on the implicit consent. Whereas if you're trying to kind of, find somebody, location is a great example. I want to make sure the transaction is happening from the same location, trusted circles where you generally transact from. Well, explicit consent will be very important. So I think it's important, it's critical. We need to manage it, store it, but more importantly, be very transparent with the consumer. Whether you're implicit or explicit, I think in either scenario it needs to be very, very transparent with the consumer. Don't surprise them. I think once we lose that trust, it's game over.
Maybe just to add one more thing,
of
this consent framework I was talking about, that's Camara, it's no longer a dream. We've already deployed it with some of the largest operators in the world. And the first deployment was Deutsche Telekom.
Yeah, and we're seeing like announcements almost. It feels like every week we see an announcement that more and more operators have jumped onto Camara. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so no, absolutely. I think, oops, sorry. I'm going to circle back to what I said at the start around this hunger for use cases. And one of the reasons there's this hunger, or maybe the key reason there's a hunger for use cases, is because people are still trying to understand how they can monetize or commercialize network APIs. So I don't know if we can dig in a bit more to that, what you're seeing in terms of commercial models around network APIs. Hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot. I'll let, if any one of you wants to go first on that question.
Maybe I'll start. I think that, as I said earlier, the first application that we're seeing is to fix what I will call, from a Canadian perspective, in our economy, I think the basic trust is broken. Businesses don't trust consumers. They don't know, do I onboard this customer? Do I let them log in? Do I step up? And consumers are not trusting businesses. I'm getting a call. Is this actually a spam call that is coming in, and somebody is going to tell me something that is not really coming from my institute? We were talking about RCS and SMS earlier. Can I trust that SMS that is coming in? So I think the basic fabric of trust is broken. And when that trust is broken, that is the application which I believe is where the first application network APIs are coming in and fixing that. The commercial model that goes along with that is how do you provide the businesses the capability with high confidence that, they can allow the login or they can allow that authentication. So commercial models are evolving. I think like SMS, the businesses have kind of tried to go a per transaction type of model. I think there is subscription type of models that are out there. And frankly speaking, I think there is still a lot of experimentation learning that needs to come in terms of what really works for the business, what will add value, how do we kind of prove the ROI for them, and the commercial models need to kind of continue to scale with that. I believe that the next focus for us is like keep scaling the security identity use case in the application, but where is the next use case going to come from, right? Is this the quality of demand? Is this some field service operations where they need high quality videos and things like that? I think that's sort of the new opportunities that we need to find. And frankly, I don't know whether it's going to be a single business model that can fit different applications. I think as an industry, we need to be open to trying different business models depending upon the application and the end outcome.
Yeah, and Ryan, from the TELUS perspective?
Yeah, well, I'll touch on two things. First of all, about trust. I agree that the trust relationship between businesses and consumers is strained. I'm not sure I'll go as far as saying it's broken, but it's strained. But I do think this is where telcos have a role to play. I think research shows that we're one of the most trusted brands by consumers. You might not want to pay for our services, but you trust us. And I think it's important to manage that relationship and to make sure that you can continue to trust us with your data and to use that appropriately, because I think we can build that bridge. One of the use cases, and it's hard because I think network APIs open up a plethora of use cases. I don't know what all the use cases are, but I do know the way to get there is to access the market and have people try them and build use cases, prototypes. This is a prototyping space where I think use cases are going to come from all parts of the organization, and we have to get out of our own way and make the go-to-market easier, make the collaboration easier, and allow people to access them. But one use case that I'm mulling around, and it relates to a panel this afternoon, is in the world of DCB. I would have loved to be able to have a FIFA app, charge for the access to the FIFA app, and I would love to give a QOD access on an API so that person can watch the game wherever they want to with whatever bandwidth they want to. We're not there yet, but that use case, bringing together network resources, bringing together subscription on demand, bringing also together the ability to put it on your TELUS bill, those sound like a use case worth monetizing.
No, absolutely. I was telling you, Upinder, yesterday evening that in our working group, some of the use cases that come up are things you would never have thought about, and two of them were from India. And hopefully I haven't told everybody these stories already, but I'll give one example, which is I believe it's a company in Delhi that guarantees delivery in something like 10 or 20 minutes. And they were just looking for ways to save every second they could in that delivery process. So they weren't really concerned by authentication per se or fraud. They just wanted to be able to go through the onboarding process and authentication process a lot more quickly, and Network API solved that for them, saved them valuable minutes to make their delivery. So that's what we're talking about from the supply side. I don't know, Terry, if you wanted to.
I think on the use case side, I can talk about one example where it's not just about monetizing network capabilities, but it's also about the network data, the network outputs is equally valuable. So one example that I think we've spoken about is this idea of if you're Uber and Lyft, your biggest challenge is you want to put your drivers close to where the users are or the riders are. And it turns out if you look at operators, you have real-time data around population density and population movement. Now that data has been around since 4G world, since 4G days. It just wasn't made available, right? But that's just one example of a use case for that data, but there are many, many other use cases. In terms of monetize commercial model, I think from my standpoint, from LotusFlare standpoint, the way we have been talking to all the operators is that no one knows what the right model is. Therefore, you need a flexible platform to support the different models. So in fact, as part of the consent work that we did, we even made purpose and scope that we talked about earlier a parameter that you can monetize on. So you could charge different price based on what the purpose of the API is.
Wow. Very interesting. Look, we have, I'm going to go to the floor to see if there's any questions. If not, I'll ask a couple more, but just in case. Yep. Hang on a sec. Susan will bring you the mic.
Sorry. Clinton D'Souza from Sampo Insurance. I'm really interested in the insurance perspective, especially EnStream. I think I've been reading up a little bit about on the fraud, and but also from a TELUS perspective, a lot of, going back to the rideshare stuff, a lot of Ubers and Lyfts, etc., do use a lot of data. Insurance has been a tremendous, I guess, it's been a challenge for a lot of rideshare companies as well. But do you think the data is going to make a difference from an insurance perspective, especially for the rideshare industry? And if if TELUS is going to get into the insurance aspect.
I think it was to TELUS and to EnStream.
So, no, TELUS and banking and insurance probably not our thing. Certainly not my area of the business. The closest thing we come to is in the health business, where we do health insurance. But I think that I mean, my insurance company is already offering me nice discounts to be able to share my location information with them through an app, and so I can see why that would be a good vector of data for rideshare. And I think the question would be, how do we work with Uber and the insurance companies and what they need, and can we expose it? I think it's a good use case, because I imagine you're going to use that data to be able to determine who are the good drivers and who are not, and who's insurable. So I think that's a good use case.
I'll add to that. I think to answer your question directly, will the data make a difference? 100%. I think having the additional data sets, having sort of multi-layered data, hugely beneficial. I'll give you a simple example. Ride sharing for sure, but even as a primary insurance holder, we are seeing trends in the market where consumers are becoming really smart. They know that there is the higher insurance premium for location A versus location B. So optimize the address that you have with the insurance company so that you can actually pay lower premium. So there's revenue that is being left on the table, millions of dollars. We're working with the insurance companies, and we are kind of seeing those kinds of use cases. And when you bring the insurance data and the underlying kind of telecom data, very critical that it's all done from a privacy protected manner, because you're not really kind of sharing anything specifically. You're kind of scoring and providing the risks and things like that. But that's just one simple example where there is a revenue that is leaking, and you can protect that because of the address optimization. Same thing with the Uber example that Ryan shared. I agree with that as well. But I think data, absolutely, the more you can add, the more you can bring into the mix, it will help make intelligent and smarter decisions.
Maybe I'll just add to what Upinder has said. I agree. It could be hugely beneficial to the insurance industry. Just take the example of population movement and density. It turns out that data can be kind of further segmented, because you can tell between car traffic versus foot traffic. If you're underwriting insurance for cars, I think that data would be super helpful. That's more at an aggregate level. Even at an individual level, you can imagine there are kind of these more innovative services where I think some of the car kind of companies offer this, or insurance company offer this. If you share your driving habits, then they will give you better rates depending on what kind of driver you are. Now, you can easily enable that on the network side as well, right? So if I kind of opt into that service using a telco service to track my location and my behavior and how fast I'm going, now that data can feed into your underwriting.
Great. Any other questions? All right. I mean, we just have a couple of minutes left. Maybe to take advantage of the last couple of minutes, we had these questions on the last panels. Where do you see network APIs evolving over the next few years, if that's possible to even figure out? So kind of rapid fire answers, because we have like two minutes left. Starting with you, Ryan.
I mean, I think the possibilities are endless. Certainly, QOD, identity, and agentic AI are the ones that I think are going to be prolific. I think it will come down to the partnerships that you make and how you can go to market together, though, because I do think the industry is fragmented in this space, and we need to be less fragmented to be able to innovate.
Nice.
I'll double down on that. Listen, if I knew all the use cases in the next couple of years, I wouldn't be here. But I think what's really important and critical is the environment that we set up. Are we as an industry, are we willing to prototype? Are we willing to experiment? Are we going to fail fast and kind of move on to the next thing? So I think go-to-market focus is going to be critical over the next couple of years. I think ability to take on the risk to try different business models, different use cases, different markets, I think that will be very critical. And the partnerships that that we are putting in place that we referenced earlier, those are extremely critical. So we will stay focused in terms of the security and identity. I think there is a lot more to do over there, but open up the brand new use cases that we can collectively work on. But I think it's going to be a collaboration. The name of the game is going to be collaboration across the chain, right? The network operators, CPaaS players, technology providers, enterprises. We really need to kind of focus on the again, back to my point, APIs, not on the technology, not on the APIs, on the outcomes in terms of what's the business value that we can add. Once we get that, I think we can really expand the use cases.
Final words.
I think the biggest challenge in my mind for the market for network APIs is supply and coverage. And I experienced this myself. I talked to a lot of telcos. Some of the telcos are still sitting on the fence. They're waiting for money to come in before they invest. And that creates a chicken and egg problem because the developers are coming in saying, hey, I can't just cover 30% of the population. That doesn't work for me. And that has happened. I've had so many conversations like that. I think nobody's wrong. Everybody's being rational. But I think in order for this space to take off, I actually think we need to act a little bit more irrational.
I like that. Look, oh yeah, of course.
Okay, just quickly to add to that, the point that Terry just made about the coverage is critical. I think one of the huge learnings that we have, and I said earlier, I definitely feel looking at from a global perspective, Canada is leading. The primary reason for that is coverage. Being our sort of unique structure that we have as EnStream, when we bring these APIs to the market, we have 90% of the footprint because it's Rogers, Bell, and TELUS, all three of them coming together. Yes, it's hard to align all of them to kind of bring the roadmaps in a time, perfect timing is always difficult. But whenever we are launching, it's the coverage. So single API, we're making it simple for the market, simple for the businesses. Single API gives them access to entire Canada. And I think that has been one of the critical things that has made these use cases to take off. If we can replicate that globally, I do believe that that will help a lot because at the end of the day, businesses are looking to help all of their customers, not parts of their customer from a particular operator.
Yeah, thanks. Look, and just to echo all three of you, I mean, from our perspective, as I said at the start of the panel, we're just seeing really increased interest by all our members in this area. So I have a very positive outlook for network APIs. We're a little bit over, so on that note, I will thank all three of you for this panel. It was fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Just leave your mics on, on the chair. Thank you. Go off that way. I'm going to stay.